were only 14 years old when you were wrongfully convicted. What was your initial reaction at that time when the verdict was read?
When the verdict was read, like, because by this point, I'm already locked up over a year.
Yeah.
Right? You're talking about the conviction itself.
Yeah.
And so we've been on trial for a couple of months. So when the verdict comes in, it's this feeling of how did they get it wrong, right? When you go back and you look at our case, we know that there's two markers from the scene, right? One is there's a DNA stain on the sock, and then DNA that's in the woman. And so we know that within 6 weeks of the case, 2 months of the case, they knew that it wasn't us, right? Because the DNA comes back and it doesn't match to the 5 of us. And then later on to find out that they tested over 40 children, right? Stuff that we didn't know about. But for me, it was just about like, how did they get it wrong, right? When you look at our statement, like mine's, it says approximately 1,700 hours, myself and 49 friends travel southbound, right? And you go, no 14-year-old kid talks like that. And so the whole time, I knew that I lied on the statement. They knew that I lied. My biggest thing was that we always thought they was going to come back and say, why did you lie? And so when they never came back and they pushed it forward, then it was like, what are we doing? Like, so you're going to railroad us on purpose, knowing that we're innocent. So even by that time that we're convicted, like when they take you in the back after the verdict is read, and they take me in the cell, and the first thing the officers ask me for is my shoelaces, my belt, and my tie, because they think that you're going to commit suicide, right? But these were the same officers who, even they watching the case, thought I was going home, thought that we was going to beat it. So it was like just this state of like disbelief, like shock almost, like we really lost, like wow. And then then it's like, what are you going to do for the next 5 years? Don't have a clue. So again, it's the unknown.
I can't even imagine making sense of any of that at 14.
It's hard as a 14-year-old kid, because you don't know all the terminology, stuff goes over your head. The only thing that we see is our attorneys talking to the district attorney, which we felt some type of way about, stuff like that. But a lot of it goes over your head as a 14-year-old kid. All you know is that you're going to prison and you think that life is over.
Of course, yeah. Of course, I can't even imagine. Can you tell me about the very first time you met the other 4, Yusuf, all of them?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know any of them going into this case. We really met in the bullpen, before you do the prep walk, and they take us to the booking. So, at that point, when like after the investigation, they put us in this cell, and it's about 11 of us. And at that point, everybody's talking like, well, I just said I was with my boy. I didn't use no names. I said this, I said that. But not fully understanding that all of us were bamboozled. Well, most of us, right? Because Yusuf didn't make a statement. Corey made 3 different statements. And then the next thing you know, we were on the way to booking. But in that time that we sitting there talking, when we get to the booking, we're like, oh, we're being processed. And then when you go in front of the judge, we kind of like stoned. And the attorney just say, look, just look forward, don't say nothing. And then you start hearing the charges: rape in the first, attempted murder in the first, robbery in the first. And it's like 12 charges, and you go, wait a minute, what's going on? By that time, we're on our way to the facility. And then they split us up. So once we get to the facility, we go through processing. We get to talk, but we really don't get to talk. It's a little bit of when you see us, there's a little bit of that conversation in there. But we're on like a fast train to the system, right? And then we get to the jail, and we're going through processing, and one of the staff members comes downstairs because he wants to be nosy, right? And he comes in and he's talking to us, and he's like, you guys are on the front of every newspaper. Like, they're just constantly writing articles like the whole jail wants to kill you. And it's at that moment that it's like, this is reality. We're here now. But I didn't know them guys.
How did you survive those years incarcerated, being only 14 years old and your formative years, I mean, so early on? What did you do?
I still, to this day, I still don't know. Like, it's like, for me, it was like once I was put in that situation, it's like, okay, I'm here now. I have to deal with it. So whatever comes my way, you can't run from it, right? And so that became my approach to it. Just, if if somebody wanted to test me, then I understood, all right, this is where it's got to go. Because at the end of the day, I did know that part. You go to jail, and once they know you're soft, then everybody wants to take advantage of you. So I knew, like, I wasn't going to have that part,
Of course.
So.
What's under your control?
Yeah.
Yeah, the little that you have.
The little that you have. And so for me, the next morning, I go to the mess hall, and a bunch of kids looking at me, and they're like, we're going to see you. And at that moment, this is the mess hall, everybody's watching. So at that moment, I got up the table, threw a milk at them, ran towards them. The police grabbed me, pulled me back. Boy, you crazy? But that was me showing them, like, this ain't gonna be that easy.
They're like, don't mess with me.
Yeah. And sometimes it does, that one incident did send a ripple. It doesn't stop everybody, but it stops some people.
For sure, you teach people how to treat you, but it's shocking that at 14 you would even know that. I learned that way later in life.
Yeah.
For real.
It was like once you get there, and then there was a moment where, like, we had to go into the shower areas and we had to shower, and inmates were banging on the detainees was banging on the glass, saying they're gonna see us. And it's like, okay, this is what we stepping into, then you gotta make a decision.
Yeah.
So it's like, what are you gonna do?
Was it very violent in there at when you were that age?
Spofford, yes. It's like, when we get there, the introduction of raises it comes months later, but everybody was fighting. And so there was two sides of the building that was at odds with each other. And so you go down to the visit. After the visit, a fight would always break out, more than one. And if certain colors was down there more than the other, people got jumped. So it was always something going on in Spofford. Even staff put their hands on you fast too. It was like no tolerance. And if you wanted to fair with one of the staff members, they would take you in the back and they'll shoot you. You'd get a fair fight with a staff member. So it was that type of environment where, it was always about fist fighting. Yeah.
That's crazy. Prior to this, were you ever an aggressive child? Were you ever fighting with anyone at school or anything? Or was this kind of you thrown into this environment?
Well, originally I'm from the Bronx. So I was born in Harlem, and then I moved to the Bronx for a while, and then I moved back to Harlem with my dad. So early on in the Bronx, I lived in Centric Houses, project development over on University. And, there we had to learn to fight. Because there was older boys that lived in the project, so there was like a generation that was older than us, that they would bully us, they would toughen us up. And so that stuff really came in handy when I get to Spofford.
Yeah, well, for sure, and thank goodness. I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
What, if anything, do you still carry with you from that experience day to day now?
Everything. It's like in the beginning, like when I first came home, I had those characteristics from prison, right? Wash with my boxers on in the shower, eat my food in 2.5 seconds. My room in my dad's house was the size of a cell, so it was small. That's where I felt most comfortable. The door was always closed. And so when I start to notice that I had those characteristics, that becomes part of my survival skills. So it's stuff like that it doesn't leave. You walk into a room and it's crowded, you watch what's the easiest way to get out. You watch people's hands, stuff like that. So that stuff never leaves you.
You still do some of those.
Still.
Wow.
Still, to those days, to today.
Eating fast. I never heard this.
Yeah.
Why?
Because when you go into the mess hall, you have a certain amount of time to eat your food.
Uh-huh.
So that's how it was with me. It was like that same, whatever that 2 or 5 minutes was, that was me.
That's how long they give you to eat? That's it?
Yeah.
No way.
Like when you come in, once you grab your tray and you sit down, you have a certain amount of time before they start saying, all right, wrap it up. They don't keep you in there too long. Because fights break out in prison mess halls and stabbings and stuff like that. So it's always about eat and then keep them moving. So that stuff I brought back out with me into society.
You have just one daughter, is that right?
Yes.
Yes. What did you teach her about police and this kind of stuff, and at what age?
Well, it always started with me telling her that she had a voice, right? She gets frustrated, I would stop and say, what happened? And she go, I go, you gotta talk. She'll start pointing. Well, that's not good enough. So for me, it was always about equipping her with the voice. That if something happens to you, you always be able to express yourself. You always be able to tell me, right? And then when she was about 8, is when we do the doc with Ken Burns. And I remember I'm in my dad's room and she's sitting on the iPad and she's like, I know the Central Park 5. And I go, well, who are they? So she starts to explain it. So I go, okay, well, how do you know that? And she says, from watching YouTube and also listening to you and my mommy talk about it.
She was how old at the time?
She was 8 at the time. But also in that time, we would talk about like Christopher Columbus, stuff like that, history stuff that I would correct her on. So she would go to school and be like, Christopher Columbus was a criminal, right? According to my dad, he's a criminal, right? So we laughed about it recently because now she's doing the doc. She's a filmmaker, right? And so when the doc with Ken Burns comes out, she begs me to watch it. So I go, okay, we at the IFC Center this one night, me and Yusuf, because we always did these talks with the people afterwards, right? And so she goes in there, she watches it, she comes out, she comes over, she pulls me close, and she's like, Daddy, I didn't know you was one of the Central Park 5. And I go, well, what did you think? You thought I was like a producer or something? And she's like, yeah, I didn't know you was one of the boys. So then it clicked. But that night, we're back at the house, and she's like, Daddy, I feel so sorry for Corey. And I go, well, what about me? I'm your father. Like, she's like, no, but you my dad. Like, Corey's who she like connected with in the story. And so after that, she kind of grew up in it, right? And then like one time I remember she did a report for school and she was like, one of my heroes is my father. And so that's when I was like, all right, she gets it. Mm-hmm. She's growing in it to this point now where she's getting ready to graduate college this year. And she's going to be a filmmaker.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
That's great. I'm going to have to meet her.
She won her first doc now. Dealing with Afro-Latinos,
okay.
You know, in New York City, just in the world, period. You know, just a little history stuff with that. And so I just happened to do an interview for her.
Oh, that's great.
So I'll be in her first film.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. I love it's coming full circle.
Full circle.
Right.
Full circle.
How did you like protect your sense of identity when the world thought that you were this like monster? I can't imagine what that feels like.
For me, there's a part, because, you know, I go back and forth to prison, and when they see us, I deal with recidivism, getting locked back up. There's several times where I hit rock bottom, and I think that for me, I was never the one to try to hide it, and so there's a point in time where I just hit rock bottom and I didn't care, and I was just like, you know, this case, they never wanted to take the stigma off of us. Mm-hmm. This is who we are, and when we die, you'll go to your grave and they'll say, yeah, Raymond Santana, father, you know, but before that, they'll always say Central Park 5, exonerated 5. And then for me, that was the start of me embracing it. You know, like, no, I'm not gonna run from it, because even though it's the label of a rapist, you know that we fight for our innocence. We fight because we're innocent of this case. So it's like, you gotta stand on it. And once I stood on it, everything changed for me.
Really? How so?
Because then it was like, now I'm ready to go to war for it, right? I'm fighting to prove our innocence no matter what. I was the first one of the 5 who did an interview with A&E talking about what happened to us in those precincts. And so, you know, when you get to the exoneration piece, now you can't get me off the soapbox. Like, that's for me, that's the indication that I'm going in the right direction, right? It's empowering now.
Right.
And so even then, after exoneration, well, before we do the Ken Burns piece, right? This is a no-pay case. Bloomberg doesn't want to settle it. Linda Fairstein is coming to the court proceedings with 20 interns to try to intimidate us. There's still articles that's written about us up to 2012 saying that we're still guilty of something, right? And then we exonerated in 2002. So for me, it's at that moment that I say, you gotta own it. You can't, if we stay scared and we want to stay in the shadows, then they get to stand in the street and boast about how we're guilty, right? And it's like, no, you gotta go meet them in the street and tell them how you're innocent.
For sure.
And I think that becomes the transition for me, because we still had like 58 hearings that were pending. We were still in litigation with the city. And when the opportunity with Ken Burns came, because nobody else would give us an opportunity, right? All these filmmakers wasn't knocking on our doors to do projects. And if they were, it was like, well, we told you the story. The boy said this, the city says that. What do you believe? And we're like, no, that's the wrong narrative. We're innocent. You have to tell the narrative of how we're innocent. And that's for me, that became the part that we started to push. So if you come to us and you want to do a project with us, then it has to tell that piece, right? We couldn't just, because they was trying to, offer projects that was like, well, what do you think happened at the end? And it's like, no.
Yeah,
No. They don't deserve that. They don't deserve that platform to still say we're guilty of anything.
Oh, for sure. And it's just not the truth.
And it's just not the truth. So in that space, when we get to the Ken Burns, I tell my attorney, Michael Warren, I say, I'm going to do this interview. Because at this point, the city is dragging us 7 years in. They're not trying to settle nothing. And Fairstein is going on TV and she's saying, well, when we get to litigation, everything's going to come out. So they're making headway on us while the city is still getting paid to fight against us. So it was like, no, this is our opportunity to own it, to change the narrative. And that's why the Ken Burns piece was so big.
Kind of related to what you were saying about how they're in the streets, with their narrative, and you kind of have to also be there, otherwise you're allowing their narrative to go forward. How do you feel about that in a courtroom setting when someone's innocent and on trial and they're usually advised not to take the stand?
I mean, it's just a situation where it's unfortunate because it's like the lamb going to the slaughter, right? Like you really don't understand, you really don't know. If you've never been through it, it kind of goes over your head. It's like a blur. And then this is a whole system that's conspiring to create and make you a statistic, to lock you up and make you become part of the budget. And so, for me, in my case, I didn't know. Whatever was going to happen was part of the plan to happen, right? It's what you do when you figure it out. How do you fight back? How do you voice your opinion? How do you start to speak out? So I think that, when you go into those situations, because I'm not the only one, there's thousands of us, right?
For sure, yes.
Who have been through. So this is a reoccurring thing. This was done deliberately and on purpose because the city was going through financial hardships. They were trying to figure out where they was going to get money from, right? And it was about locking us up. That's where the budget money comes from.
Yeah.
Right? And also building, upstate New York, where now you gave people all these jobs. You gave people a means to survive, on the backs of at the time was 60 to 70,000 inmates. So when you're going through it, for me, I didn't understand it. But once I figured it out, then it was like, okay, now what do you do? Because they still want you to be quiet.
Right.
And it was like, no, you gotta own your narrative. You gotta start telling your story. You gotta start speaking out loud to whoever will hear it. And that's the point. I think I probably did the most growth, right, till we got to that Ken Burns doc. Because when I go to do the interview, I think my interview might have been about 2.5 hours long. And at that point, I put it all on the table. Because I was like, I have nothing to lose.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. There's only one way to go from here.
It was only one way to go. But, going back, when I'm going back and forth to prison, I have this thing where I feel like I hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
And I'm okay on rock bottom because I know that at some point when I wake up, the only direction I got to go is up. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Going back to the Central Park Five, how do you feel about, so often the media kind of comes up with these names and it's almost like a marketing slogan for them, right? In the newspapers and in magazines and whatnot. And they do it with serial killers, the Zodiac killer and all this, right? And it almost seems like it's to sell papers, right?
It is.
Right?
Yeah.
How do you feel about this Central Park Five and now Exonerated Five?
And that was the thing, right? Because we didn't want that label. We didn't ask for the Central Park Five. But it was fine when it's being written in newspapers, Wolfpack, Wilding, Urban Terrorist, Super Predator. Like those are our terminologies that was used in these papers to describe us. And so it's like you don't want these labels, but when I start to embrace it, we embrace the narrative, the label of the Central Park Five, right? Because now it's like we have a platform, we have a voice, and so even when it gets to the Exonerated Five, that's when us putting in all the work, that we get to when they see us, and Oprah says, from now on, you guys will no longer be known as the Central Park Five, you'll be known as the Exonerated Five, and then it sticks. So again, we're given a label we didn't even ask for.
Right.
But at this point, it's a positive label. It's a positive label. The work that we're doing is different.
Yeah, it's almost like you took it, you owned it, and changed the meaning of it altogether. Right. Yes. Yeah, which is beautiful.
That part.
Yeah. For sure. For sure. So do you think that the documentaries made about you and When They See Us obviously have been a part of the healing process for you?
Yeah, 100%. That and all it's stages. Because we used to do a lot of panels. In the beginning, we did when we did the Ken Burns doc, we did like over 30 film festivals, and that was part of the healing process because we got to interact with a lot of people. And then as we kept going, it becomes more because now you get to continue to tell your story. So that's part of the healing process where you get to vent a lot, right? And you might get some questions back, but it's all about you venting. So that becomes part of it also. But then it becomes a point that like you get me and Yusuf on stage at the same time in an event, and it's like this is a duo, right? You like, wait, what's going on here? This flows too smooth, right? But that's us. It's us owning it. It's us healing from it every time we get to tell the story. Every time we get to put out product, clothing, anything we do, and I think that because we had so much to tell, that's why it spills over to different mediums, but it's all part of the healing process. Every book that we write, every piece of clothing we put out, every time we sit in front of an audience and tell our story, every podcast we do, it's all part of the healing.
Do you think forgiveness is important and key, or do you feel like it's unfair expectation?
No, I think it's important at some point in your life, especially when you heal it, right? For me, I came from a big family. Like my mom had 6 brothers on one side, my father had 3 brothers, and at the end, nobody would put up bail money for me to get bailed out. A lot of my uncles thought that I was guilty, and I had to live with that. And it wasn't until the Ken Burns doc came out that they got to see it and then be like, oh. So I remember we did a film festival in LA, and 3 of my uncles showed up with my aunts and some cousins, and they apologized. And for me, at that point, it was, well, do you accept the apology or do you still stay stuck? And that was part of healing. It was like, okay, I accept it. Now, it doesn't mean that I gotta forget, right? But for me, if I can forgive, I can heal from it, I can move on. And I think that helps also, because later on in life, it makes you look at things that might be as complicated, and you start to really look at them like they're not, right? It's like, a cup half full type of person.
I work with so many people who are wrongfully convicted, like just every day of my life, that's what it is. And I always find it so almost shocking that all of you have forgive, because I don't think I could or would, and I just can't wrap my mind around it.
But there is somebody that's, all right, so that's family, right? For us, for me, to understand that the world was given a false narrative, and my uncles believed it. Even though I would have said, well, I'm your nephew, you're supposed to know me, right? But they
Yes.
believed it. I also had to take into consideration that this was a case that lasted 2.5 years, right? And every day we were in the newspaper, we were on the news. So they was the narrative that they was pitching was overflowing, right? Everybody was writing about us, on how we were bad kids. And so it was easy for me to forgive them when I understood that piece, right? But when you get to like police officers,
Yeah.
right? Homicide North Detective. I'm not gonna say police officers. We're gonna say the Homicide North Detective Squad. When you get to them, when you get to Fairstein, when you get to Lederer, when you get to Trump, these are people who it's hard to forgive them because they didn't come out and say, well, you know what? We did mess up. They all doubled and tripled and quadrupled down on our guilt.
Yeah, Trump is still.
To this day.
To this day.
To this day.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how do I forgive that? So there's still that part of me that hasn't healed because that's the part of me that's the fighter. And as long as I got somebody to fight, I have an opponent.
Yeah.
So you go out and you do the work.
Yeah. See, I almost feel like, and this is probably an unhealthy way to be, but I almost feel like I would never want to forgive them, and that's what would make me happier, is to not forgive them because they were so wrong and are so wrong still.
But that's why another reason also was to put out the different mediums was because I always said that. I said it took them 2.5 years to charge us, try us, convict us, and to send us to prison. I said now they have to deal with us for the rest of their lives. We're older now. So we have voices, we have mediums, like we can, I would love for Linda Fairstein to wake up in the morning and see Yusuf on TV in the morning as the councilman.
Right.
Right? And then you go down to some bookstore and you see we have books in the bookstore. Right?
Yes.
And then you might see somebody wearing a shirt by Parker Madison that has our names on it. And you go, oh my God, these guys are still around. Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, that's the justice. That's the get back. Right? So even if I don't forgive you, the way that I get my healing on is by doing that. Make sure you see us.
For sure. For sure.
Right?
Yeah. Do you think there's been any systemic changes in the system that would prevent what happened to you from happening today?
I think social media is one that helps. Back then, we people relied on the newspapers and the news. And so if you give them the false narrative, then they believed it. I think now with social media, there's fact checking. There's our younger generation who they don't believe everything, right? So it's a little more difficult, but can it happen? Yes, because you still have a system that rather have you occupy a jail cell than a college dorm. And as long as you have a system that operates on punishment and not rehabilitation, then anybody's acceptable. You see it now happening with Trump, right? It's the same narrative, right? In 1989, they said Black and Latino boys are dangerous. They can't come into, the nicer parts of the city because they're going to commit crime. And then what you do is they create an emotional appeal that makes people say, you got to do something about it. Lock them all up. So now the people give you the ability to do it, to make something happen. Trump did the same thing. He came in and he said, we got Mexicans coming into our country. They're rapists, they're murderers, they're criminals, they don't belong here. He created an emotional outcry that made people say, well, lock them up. And now as a result, we have a whole immigration system, right, that has over 75,000 people locked up, which is federal budget money to keep those people housed is in the billions of dollars. So it's the same thing. It's the same narrative, the same method being used on us over and over again.
Is this the reason you want to work in politics? And tell me about that. What are you doing?
It's one of the reasons, Me being from East Harlem, coming back and forth, seeing the deterioration of my neighborhood, understanding that there was culture, right? Population is diminishing, gentrification is on the rise. So when you see the change, you're like, it could have been done better than this. So that was one of the reasons that I wanted to get into politics. Also, I watched Yusuf run for councilman, and you know, Harlem has a lot of politicians, you know, who when we were the Central Park Five, supported us at some point. We're that good story that's an emotional story. So politicians will always love to use it. But when Yusuf decides to run for office, politicians disappear. And he couldn't get the help, or he couldn't get the he couldn't get the support, or just let me show you how to do it, young fella. Right? Now some politicians did, but majority of them didn't. And so for me, I was kind of mad about that.
Yeah, that's so sad.
Yeah, because I said, you know, we are sons of Harlem, and I always felt like if we want to come back and do something in the community, like run for politics, we felt that, especially our local elected officials, would support us, right? But not look at us as threats, and right? And
why?
Because a person like Yusuf, a person like me, who comes into the fold and says we want to run for politics, we come with a social media presence. We come with a backing. We come with a lot of support, and so they get afraid of that. You know, it's like if you have the numbers, then you can pick what position you want.
You can impact change much quicker.
Much quicker, right?
Yeah.
And Mandani showed that in his last election. And Yusuf, to an extent, has showed that also in his election. You know, where he got limited support, but he brings out, you know, over 10, 15, 20,000 people to vote for him, right? And that's power. It's power. And to some people, they don't expect a person like him. Like, they feel like he shouldn't have that, you know?
Yeah.
You know, you guys got exonerated. You got a lawsuit. You got this series that's all over the world. Excuse me. And now you want to run for politics? Like, it's not enough. And we're like, it's not. Why should we stop?
Of course you shouldn't.
So it's like, and then not to get the proper backing from your elected officials, you know.
Yeah.
It says a lot.
Back then, when you guys were incarcerated and going through this whole ordeal, could you ever have even fathomed that you and Yusuf would be running for city council?
Never. Like, for me, I was 14 years old. My dad never put no pressure on me to pick a profession or where you want to be. I was just a 14-year-old kid. Yeah. I was enjoying hip hop videos and wearing Gap clothes, right? So, you know, my life was simple. And then to go to prison, and even then, I had to grow. But I would have never thought. I mean, we didn't even. For me, I always figured that this case was so big that they would have never let Matias Reyes come forward and tell his truth, right? I think that if it would have went differently, something probably would have happened to him just to keep it quiet, you know. But it went the way that it went.
Have you ever come face to face with Trump?
No, Yusuf has.
He has.
In a political space. I posted it too, because I wound up getting the video and I had posted it.
No way.
Yeah, and he said something to Trump, and Trump was like, "Hey, you with me, right?" He was like, "No, I'm Yusuf Salaam." And then Trump turned around and walked away.
No way.
Yeah.
If you ever do, what would you say to him?
I don't know. I don't, because at this space in my life, I mean, it's not like I'm gonna lash out or try to put hands on him or something like that, you know. But I think that if we were ever to be in the same space, that it would be a conversation to be had.
Yeah.
You know.
I wish somebody would though. But
like we need to sit down.
Yes.
You know. And
but people like him, even sitting down with him, he's not going to understand anything.
No.
It's like talking to a wall.
No, it's because they have bought the narrative. Like, you know, during the civil case, we did over 100 depositions, and we get to sit in those depositions, right? You know how this stuff goes. And like I sat in Fairstein's deposition, I sat in some of the detectives, and they all still said we were guilty.
Right.
Like you know, like we sat in Fairstein's, and my lawyer says, Jonathan Moore says, so are they still guilty? And she, with a straight face, she said, yes.
The psychology, and I've seen this in so many of these cases, the psychology of these people, whoever, detectives, DAs, whoever, like medical examiners, who can't admit wrong, just the human nature of being married to wanting to be right, it just boggles my mind. I don't understand it.
I don't need, and it's like, I really believe like the quicker you say, yeah, we messed up and we're sorry, it's over.
It's over, and not only is it over, but the average person watching from the outside will automatically have more respect for you.
Yes.
They'll be more sympathetic towards if you can say, I really honestly made a mistake, because that's what people gravitate towards, authenticity, and we're all human. We all know we can make mistakes.
Period.
Even if they did it on purpose, which I know a lot of them did, even if they were smart enough to say, I made a mistake, I'm just to gain public, even if it was for the wrong reasons, is what I'm saying. It would land so much better than being married.
Because even if you told us, all right, you know what, guys, we messed up, we apologize, we're sorry, then it's like, it kind of takes the fight out of us.
Yes.
How much, less we want to be bullies.
Yes, and it kind of ends it.
It kind of ends it. And that was the thing. I sat in these depositions, and they all said we were guilty. And I remember Jonathan saying, so they still guilty? And she said, yes, with a straight face. And he said, even Corey? And she said, yes. And I remember he said, damn. And it was like, strike that from the record. But it was just like, wow, even at this stage, you're still going to hold on to it? And they were like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We did a deposition with Commissioner Ray Kelly. And he wasn't even he was a rookie. He was walking the beat in '89. He wasn't commissioner. And even he was like, well, according to the Armstrong report, they're guilty. And we were like, well, did you read the Armstrong report? He's like, yes. Did you read the Nancy Ryan report? Yes. But they're still guilty. Because then it was just about just maintaining that wall of silence.
Did you answer this? So what are you doing in politics right now?
So I took a break. So I ran for city council.
Okay.
And so we didn't win, but to me, it was my first run.
Of course.
Right? And I really had a good time doing it. Because, the chairman told me, he said, this is probably gonna be the hardest thing you ever gonna do besides going to prison. And I was like, well, I don't think so, because during this process, we had to do petitions, right? We would travel all around the city, getting people to sign petitions. We knocked on tons of doors. Like, we put in a lot of work. So for me, it kind of ignited some fire.
Yeah.
Because at the time I was in Atlanta, watching my daughter go to school. And then, so there's a part of me that felt like I was retired, right? And then I'm watching Yusuf, and he's in the streets, he's in the battle, running for council. He's doing what he's supposed to be doing. And I'm watching him, and I'm starting to get that itch, like an old prize fighter.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, wow. And then I talked to him, I said, well, how do you feel? And he's like, I feel like how we felt in the Central Park 5 days. How he's in the streets every day and just talking to people. And I could see that he was living. And I was like, oh, I think this is what I got to do. And so that's another reason that made me get into it, because then it was like, as I'm doing the campaign run, I felt alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good for you. Yeah. So you're gonna do it again? Take a break and do
I don't know. Because now I'm getting other offers, and some of these things I can't talk about them now, but they're very impactful positions. So I gotta weigh them now.
Sure.
Because if running for public office is one thing, but if I land a position that can be impactful in a whole different light,
of course,
I gotta look at it.
Yeah, of course. Well, if you do, put us all to work.
No, 100%. I am gonna run in my neighborhood for district leader.
Okay.
Which is just like it's like one of the low level positions, right?
Okay.
So it doesn't pay. But there's some positions that you can have or maintain that you can really know what's going on in the community, right? To be on top of what's going on, and so that things don't happen and you kind of like stuck, not knowing what's going on in your neighborhood at all times. So stuff like that I'll probably do, and then it'll be good to like start from the bottom again. If I decide to go into politics, it'll be good to start from the bottom.
Yeah, yeah. Good for you. That's great. I wanted to ask you about the Adnan Syed case because that's what brought me into the wrongful conviction space initially. Did you follow that case?
I read some of it.
Some of it.
Yeah, like I read some stuff on it. I didn't follow it at the time.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what I was doing. Might have been in Atlanta.
Okay, yeah, it was 2014, so it was a while back. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a while back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was getting ready to go to Atlanta. We was going through the civil case here in the city.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
What I wanted to ask you specifically is, and if you can speak to it, is, they exonerated him.
Yes.
And then they overturned that exoneration.
Yes.
And it's one of the first or a very few of cases where that's happened in this country.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that and the precedent that it sets for the legal system?
Because, all right, so what I read, right, and you correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
What I read was that the reason why they overturned it was because the victim's brother, I guess he had made a statement saying he was with him, right? And they didn't notify him that he was having a hearing to be exonerated. I guess they wanted him to testify.
He wasn't with him. He said he didn't get sufficient notice for that hearing.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's why they did it. That's why they redid that whole hearing. They just said,
so they
scrap
redid
that,
the whole
let's
hearing.
pretend it didn't happen. They redid
Okay.
that whole hearing.
Okay.
I think that taking away the exoneration was truly just corruption, so that he can't sue, so he can't.
Well, that's in there too, though.
Yeah.
100%. Because automatically, once you exonerated, then for us, they asked us to file in the court of claims.
Yeah.
And so. Like they made this big thing, like, oh, we're gonna settle this case. Don't worry about it. It's gonna take care of it.
Yeah.
And then they wanted us. They wanted to give us like money that you will receive if you went to court of claims.
Yeah.
And we was like, no, that's not. This case is bigger than that. It ain't just about the amount of time that you served in prison.
Yeah.
Like there's a whole nother aspect that goes into it. Like, like our family members, our moms and dads didn't receive any money from this case either.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Where there's documented that in other exonerees, parents have received money.
Yes.
So it is the politics behind it.
For sure.
100%.
For sure.
If they can stop him, yeah, I can see that too. If they do the hearing and then I think he gave him like time served or something, right? He gave, and that was 100%, to say, nah, we're not gonna let him sue. Because they did that to me. When I go through the exoneration, I'm on a drug case, right? I'm serving a 3.5 to 7 drug case. I'm upstate. So when the exoneration comes through, they have to resentence me as a first-time offender because I have this drug case. And at the time, I had 4.5 years in. So if you look at that drug case, that would have been probation. Right, so they would have had to pay me for 4.5 years. But what they did was they gave me time served. So they gave me a sentence similar, right? They gave me a 1.5 to a 4.5, right? And then let me go with time served, but I was still on 6 months parole, right? And that's how they do it too, because that is a way of them not having to pay you.
Right, right.
100%.
My question isn't even really about specifically about Adnan, but the notion that an exoneration can be taken away after you've been exonerated. How do you feel?
No, yeah, I have a problem with that. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, if he's innocent, he's innocent. But I think that's another way too, right? They dress up to say, well, no, let's just do the hearing over, right? But in that hearing of doing it over, they correct, all the stuff that they're supposed to correct.
Yes.
That probably would have, like now he can't sue, right?
Right. Right.
No. And it's unfortunate because he, at the end of the day, he spent 24 years in prison.
Yeah, yeah.
And he should be compensated for those years.
For sure, and he was
Period.
17. Yeah, exactly. And I don't know what legal avenues he has. I'm not a lawyer, but I don't think he has very many.
But now you put him back out on the street, and that was a problem that we had with the exonerees early on. When you have an exoneree, you put him back on the street and you expect him to go fend for himself.
Yeah.
Right? There were no services to help him transition.
Yeah.
Right. That's the reason why even after you receive the money, you still should have an accountant. Like, is these things that you still should have in place to preserve the money for long term.
For sure, and all the skills you didn't learn in the time that you would have been
100%.
a free person,
Because it's a setup. If they give you some money and they know you have this big part of your life that's missing, there's undevelopment there. So you turn around and let's say he would have got a $10 million settlement, So now you give this person $10 million
Mm-hmm.
and you expect him to balance it and budget it on his own?
Right. Right. Right.
And he has this big part of his life that's missing. At this stage in his life, he should have a house, he should have a family, he should have a car,
Yes.
right? He should be productive, but he has none of that. And then you give him this money and say, well, make it happen.
Yeah, it's so true.
It's
true.
a pitfall.
Yeah, and the money, I mean, of course they deserve every penny, but there's some things that like you can just never, maybe you can't have kids anymore, maybe you can't, there's things that are just taken forever that you may have wanted that you just can't ever get back.
Period.
No matter what. Yeah.
And they think that the money just supposed to suffice and make
Right.
It's okay. And you go, no, because it's even that when you do get the money and then you start to live in that money, it goes fast.
Yes.
Right? And
Yes.
then next you know, 10 years later, you're like, where'd the money go?
For sure. For
Right?
sure.
Because we don't come from having accountants and managers and somebody to watch our money and say, hey, an investment person, right? We don't have that. We don't get those people,
Mm-hmm.
right? We just figure it out.
Right.
And by that time, you blow a substantial amount of money, and now you're like, oh shit, I gotta figure this out.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Tell me about When They See Us. What was it like? Which was so hard to watch, by the way. It was. I almost turned it off after the first when it first aired, and then I was like, no, I gotta just get through this. What was it like to see these kids play you guys as children?
There's a part during the making where we had to do a photo shoot with the kids, right, with the boys, and it's all five of us. It's them, and it's this part where we're just watching them, and they're just being kids, right? They're horse playing, they're laughing, they're dancing, and we're looking at them, and we're going, wow, that's us. And it was an emotional part. It's not in the film. This is like
us, when you were hanging out.
Yeah, us doing the photo shoot, and it was just like, wow, like this is who we would have been, right? This is who we were supposed to be. And instead of having five playful teenagers, you have five men who are broken from the system, right? And so for me, When They See Us it was a pivotal time for us because we were fighting against the city, we were reclaiming our voices, we were men now, and so when we sit down to do the interviews with the writers, the brothers, they were willing to tell more of their story, especially Corey, right? Corey, at this point, we're all grown and we're living life, and Corey's like, no, I need to tell my story. And so, that's why episode 4 becomes so impactful, because it's him telling his story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even we didn't know, there was parts that we didn't know.
Oh, really? Of his story?
Of his story.
Oh, wow.
That we didn't know. Some of it when I read the script, some of it when we got to watch the episode, because we watched it with him. And he wanted us to watch it because for a long time he felt like the four of us were able to go on and live productive lives, and he still was stuck, not knowing how to move forward. So when we do When They See Us, that's him telling, venting, letting us know, like, look what happened to me. Now you understand why I can't move the way y'all move. And so then it was us saying, all right, we need to slow up and let's help him to try to, make it work,
Yeah.
Yeah.
The actual rapist, Mateus, what made him confess? Why did he actually confess?
So him and Corey was in the same prison, and he saw Corey spin in the yard, right? How they walk in circular motion in the yard. So he saw him spin in the yard, and by this time Corey has bad feet, and he felt something about that, right? And but he didn't go to him right away. He spoke to some of the other inmates, some of his friends, and he was like, yo, there's this dude that's here. I feel bad. And also, Mateus Reyes at the time was starting to go to church more, so he was seeking some type of higher power. And so one day he sees Corey spinning, and he decides to go over and say hello. Now, back in 1989, they was on the same housing unit, right? And they had a fight over the TV, and I believe that Corey has a scar from Mateus Reyes from the fight, So now when he sees him 13 years later, and he goes to Corey, introduces himself. Corey doesn't really remember. And he's like, yo, we had a fight over the TV in '89, you know, just wanted to apologize for that. And Corey was like, look, man, we both here, doesn't matter. But they just had this conversation, and then in the conversing, he just felt like he had to say something. And so he went to the prison chaplain. He started telling the prison chaplain his story. And then from there, it snowballed. But what happened was, our attorneys got a hold of it, and they sent an investigator up there to get an affidavit. And that's basically, once we got the affidavit, then Albany was already starting to move in because they wanted to do an investigation into his claims. And so when they go and they meet with him, they didn't believe him, right? They was trying to tie him in as the sixth man, right? And so he gave them 4 unsolved cases, right? 4 of them. And then when the DNA matched, they knew that he was the perpetrator. But the whole time during that 8th-month investigation, they was trying to connect him to us. And so we have emails between Robin Morgenthau and the police department, where Robin Morgenthau is telling them that they're dirty, that all they've been trying to do is connect Reyes to us and make him the sixth man. So he pushed them out of the investigation. So there was a big thing in City Hall about that. The police wanted to sue the DA's office, and then they brought Mateus Reyes down for a deposition. His deposition was 3 days long, and the whole time he steadfast. To the point that even in his deposition, he said, "Look, I'm getting tired now because I'm sitting here trying to do the right thing, and y'all keep trying to connect me to these boys." And he was known as the Eastside rapist, the Eastside slasher. He did all his crimes on his own. He worked in a bodega around the corner from the 23rd precinct. So he knew a lot of the police that were coming in for coffee and donuts. And the night that he attacked the Central Park jogger, upon leaving the scene of the crime, they pulled up in front of him in the car, in an unmarked car, because they recognized him. And they said, do you see any boys, any kids running around? And he said, no, right? And this is all in his deposition. It's all in his testimony. He says that when he walked away from the police officers, if they would have looked at his jeans, they would have saw all the blood on him.
Wow. So there's so many aspects of what you just said that are like mind-boggling.
Mm-hmm.
That, I mean, to start with, that a brutal rapist like that can have the heart to, like for Corey, but not in the moment when he almost murdered somebody.
Yeah.
Like, how does that even happen?
And he was he committed an attempted rape, I think 2 or 3 days before the jogger in Central Park.
Right, I read about that.
Right, and then later on, that summer he goes to rape, I think 4 women, and he kills one, right, who was a pregnant woman. He kills her. So this guy, I mean, even in the early stages of Law and Order, the TV show, there's a clip that they show, a newspaper clip, it says Eastside Rapist. That was one of his headlines. In early DNA books, his case is in it along with our case. So, like, they dropped the ball so much on this guy that it's like they rather just stick to the narrative that we're guilty. That's one of the narratives they put in the Armstrong report, that we were all in cahoots together, and that we knew that he did it, and that we had this big plan that we was going to sue the city afterwards and walk away with the money. Yeah. For
an actual perpetrator, the rapist, to have to sit with detectives and say, "I'm trying to do the right thing and I'm getting tired of this," that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like, truly, you can't write this stuff.
No.
I mean, it's
right.
It's truly stranger than fiction. Truly.
No. That's why I believe we're that case that, those people, they really want to forget.
Of course.
Because everything that can go bad did.
Yeah. And
they never fixed it.
Yeah. Do you have any one memory that stands out from the time you were incarcerated?
I got a bunch of them. I mean, everything from I was in the college program, and I had this. I wasn't taking it serious in the beginning. I had a 1.9 GPA, academic probation, and I had this Black Studies class, and it was this tall brother, had a dark voice. He was the professor, so instantly we all listened to him, right? Because he was like a big brother, and he had also served time in prison. He was a professor he served time during the Attica riot, so he had credentials. And I remember we was working out of this one book on the syllabus, but he wound up giving us about 5 books to study. And I remember asking him why. And he said, you don't understand it right now, but one day you will. These books will be a part of your arsenal. And it wasn't until later on I started reading those books, right? That was the autobiography of Malcolm X, People's History by Howard Zinn, The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson. So he gave us these books that, for me, became part of my building blocks on who I was going to become later on, not fully understanding. But he started that path for me. So it's stuff like that. I mean, I met a lot of good people in the system, right? Sharif Wilson was a kid who was in my facility, in the juvenile facility, who I didn't know, but later on found out they had 3 murders, right? And they were innocent, right? And when you watch this kid, he was this chubby kid that he liked cookies, right? You know, he didn't do no murders.
Right.
And then later on, they were exonerated. You know, so stuff like that. John Bunn was another one who came through my facility. I used to teach a writing class. He was one of my students in the class. So it's cats that I came across during my time in the system who later on become exonerees. And it's like, wow.
You know, all statistics aside, because I don't think there is any accurate measurement, how often, how frequently do you think wrongful convictions happen? How many people are innocent and locked up?
That's a whole lot. Especially because in the 80s, you know, a lot of those wrongful convictions come from the 80s.
Right.
Right? It comes from that time when the city was figuring out how they were going to recoup that money. And they came up with a plan, lock everybody up, right? And you see it, that's the influx of the prison population. It starts to grow at that point, right? And I think that's where they did the most damage.
Yeah.
Right? So you've seen it all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about, so your clothing brand, right? I love the name because I live on Madison and Park is the very next street. The minute when I saw the first time I saw it online, I was like, what is this? I have to have this. And I didn't know it was yours actually when I saw, I think on Instagram or somewhere. Tell me about the name and tell me about that and tell me about the book.
So I was always a sketch artist, right? Growing up, like to draw graffiti, Marvel characters. And so when I go through this case, I kind of struggle with that. I lose the passion, don't want to do it, you know, come home, start hustling. And so, but it resurfaces every once in a while. But I would be like, not now. And so it wasn't until after exoneration, like now I had this time on my hands and I said, well, what do I want to do? And I was sitting there talking to, at the time, my business partner, Rashid Young. And he said, well, now you got this money, you can go anywhere you want, you can just relax. And I said, no, I'm like, I want to build this t-shirt company. And I remember he saying, a t-shirt company for what? And I said, no, because I have this thing about me, this passion with art, right? And I'm trying to reclaim it. So I'm like, if I'm not successful, as long as I say I did it, right? I went back and I corrected it, right? And I did it. So that's how we started Park and Madison. And I lived on 111th Street between Park and Madison.
Oh, is that why you named it that? Oh, no way. See, that's why I resonated with it right away. I was like, wait, what? This is streets I'm on every day of my life.
Yeah, I lived on 111th Street between Park and Madison. I was married at the time, so I lived there. And so then I moved to Georgia.
Yeah.
But I still kept pushing the brand, and so I was shipping it right out of my house. I had an office in my house and everything. And so, but it was more like, it was a hobby.
Yeah.
Right? It was me fulfilling a passion, and then I was actually doing it. So I didn't buy like big quantities of shirts. You know, like I would put out a drop and, you know, maybe it'll be, you know, 100 T-shirts, 200,
Right.
like small. And so we get to when they see us, and then I designed the T-shirt with the names on it, right? And so we was in talks with another brand to do some work together, but that didn't work out. So I'm like, well, I'm just gonna put this on Park in Madison.
Yeah.
And so I put it out on Park in Madison, and it drops. We drop it like the next day after when they see us. And I remember Ava's, she goes, well, how many T-shirts did you order? And I said, well, we ordered about 1,000 T-shirts. And she's like, Raymond, that's not enough. And I'm like, hey, you don't know what you're talking about. Stick to movies. This is my lane. And so she's like, okay, brother, you got it. And the next
She was right.
we drop it, right? And I mean, within like, not even by 12 o'clock, like the shirts was moving. So I go, I got 1,000 T-shirts, I'm okay. I get a call from an organization and they're like, yeah, we need 500 shirts. And I go, 500 shirts? And they go, yes. Here's the money, send us our product. And I go, that's half of my inventory. And so the next 2 months was just chaotic because we wound up shipping out like maybe like 6,000 shirts, and there'd be another 6,000 orders in the laptop. And I had a team of like 4 or 5 friends working, and I was like, y'all want to do overtime? And they're like, no, we've been working all day.
Yeah.
So it was a headache, but it was a good headache.
Of course. Did Ava say I told you so?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had to tell her. She was like, told you. And I was like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. That's great.
But we wound up, it wound up going global.
Yeah.
Like, we sold a lot of shirts, and the love and support was all over. It was constant.
Yeah.
But it was, after that, it was like, all right, Park in Madison is here.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And tell me about the book.
So now the book, I was originally supposed to do a book, the 5 of us.
Okay.
Right? And so that didn't happen because Yusuf was working on his own books at the time. And so I was like, well, you know what? Let's do my book. So we wound up doing this book. And it's the first of its kind because it's an illustrated memoir. Right? And so it's geared for young readers. So it's my story, talking about me going through the system, going through the Central Park jogger case at 14 years old. And this book is geared towards young readers. So it's even down to the illustrations, the colors, the wording is all geared towards giving that message to the young reader. And so for me, that was a unique thing. So that's why I decided to do it. Everybody's waiting for a memoir, tell us the whole story and your ex-wife, and they want to know all the
details, of course.
Yeah.
Once you're in the public eye, they want to know all the dirt.
So now when they hear this book, they thinking, oh, this is the one. I'm like, no. This is for young readers. Is geared towards giving a message to the children.
Yeah.
Which has always been our story. It's always been our message, right? To save our young people from, not wanting another Central Park 5.
Yeah. I was a teenager when this happened, and I'm Canadian, so I lived in Canada, on the West Coast, and it was all over the news.
Yes.
I remember it, it's ingrained in my brain, it was everywhere, and I have never once in my life jogged in a park because of this story, never once, because it was so terrifying.
I mean, here I was, my daughter at the time, right? I tell you, she's 8 years old, she's like, Daddy, can I go to the park? And I'm like, we're not going there.
Yeah.
I would purposely not take her over there because, Central Park got these nice playgrounds.
Yes.
And I would purposely not take her over there because if she saw it, she's going to beg me, please,
She want to keep going, yeah.
Yeah, so I would take her to other playgrounds instead. So it kept me away from there for years. And then, in 1989, I didn't frequent the park like that.
Yeah.
I didn't, I've been on the outskirts because of the, Puerto Rican Day Parade and stuff like that, but never really in Central Park. So I didn't even know my way around that night.
Yeah.
So I was stuck with people who I didn't know trying to maneuver.
Yeah.
But yeah, I stood away from the park for a long time. It wasn't until we had the gate of the exonerated.
I was just going to say, I was there. I filmed the whole thing. I was there that day.
Oh,
yes.
Wow.
And I think You said that was the first time, right?
Yeah,
Was
I
it?
brought
that
my
you
daughter.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
that
remember you
was the
saying
first time I
that.
brought my daughter to the park. That was because I was so like, no, you're not, and I just stood away from it for a long time. Like, I guess that's one of those psychological effects.
Absolutely.
Because I wouldn't run on the treadmill, like anything jogging
Yeah.
associated. I was
Yeah.
like, no.
I'll only run. I literally will only do it in my living room, like where it's safe. Like I can just do it here, and yeah.
When I started doing it was when I lived in Atlanta when I lived in Georgia for a while. I would run. I ran 5 miles a day.
Yeah.
For months, for a period of time in my life, and then I was like, that's it for me, it's over.
Yeah.
But I stood away from the park for a long time. Now because of the gate, it's different. Now I feel like I got ownership. Like,
Yeah, you do have ownership.
Yeah, like you can't tell me nothing. I'm like, you see this gate right here?
Like my name's pretty much on
My
it.
name is pretty. So now I'm like, no, I'll go in there whenever I want.
Yeah,
and I wish you would stop me.
Right.
Like,
It's same as the name. Like you take ownership of it and
you
change
take
the meaning.
ownership, yeah. You take ownership, and you can't put my name on it because then I'm like, no, I come in whenever I want.
Yeah, good for you, as you should.
Yeah.
For sure. It was a beautiful day. It was a really long day.
It was
a beautiful day.
It was.
Remember how cold it was that day?
It was.
Yeah.
My feet was frozen after.
Oh, mine were too. Oh my God. Yeah, mine were too.
But we had a great time. A lot of people came out.
Yeah, it was packed.
And it's funny because in them situations, you expect a large turnout, but I'm so humble with it that I'm like, even if 5 people come, it's still gonna go down.
Yeah, right.
And so to see that turnout, it was like, wow. It was Harlem embracing us. Yeah. Harlem supporting us.
Yeah.
So then it was like, oh, this is perfect.
It was a beautiful thing, and it's a beautiful gate.
Definitely.
Everything.
They did their thing with it.
Yeah.
I mean, even when I go over there now, if I'm in the area, I gotta stop and rub on it.
Yeah.
Like the tree stump in the Apollo, like I gotta rub on the gate.
Yeah.
So.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Is there anything I didn't ask you that you want to talk about?
I mean, I don't know. The story is just, it's a lot. Like. Yeah. We could sit here and talk about this for hours.
I know. I truly could. We'll do it again. We'll have to do it again. Definitely. Well, thank you, Raymond. And thank you for bringing me a book. Pleasure. Did you sign this for me?
Yeah, I signed it.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
I used to think that was so, like, I remember you used to bring me a signed book, and I was like, bro, you my bro. You don't need to sign it. I see you all the time. But
no, it's meaningful.
It's meaningful.
And then every time you read it, you remember the day, you know?
Yeah. No, definitely.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you for sitting down with me. Thank you for the book, and yeah, I'm so happy that you're doing so well.
No, thank you for having me. Thank you for giving me a platform to once again vent and tell my story.
Oh, anytime.
This like I stated earlier, is always part of the healing process when we get to sit in forums like this and tell our story.
Yes, and you know what? Maybe we need to do another day. Maybe you can bring your daughter and talk about the film stuff we were talking about before we started recording about.
No, that'll be something because I know that I watched her grow in this, and I never really asked her about it. Yeah. And then for her now to be a filmmaker in her own right, or she's trying to work her way towards that, and we did an interview this weekend together, and it's just like wow, like this was an 8-year-old kid, now she's 20, about to be 22. Yeah. Right. That's awesome. And she's interviewing me. Yeah. Right. And yeah, that's amazing. It's amazing. That's amazing. My son is 8 now, right now. Yeah. And because I've been doing this since he was 1, he knows everything about wrongful convictions, and he asks so many questions, and I'm just happy that he's so aware of, police misconduct But that's what it's about. Yeah. Right? I mean, we went from me growing up, my dad, when me and him converse, it was more like, hey, take a girl out. You like girls or stuff like the birds and bees type of talk. And with our children, we gotta have the talk of like, hey, if you stop by police, this is how you gotta act. Yeah. Call me. You gotta, we gotta have those discussions. It's like, wow, to prepare our children just to survive on a daily basis. That you gotta have a whole conversation. Yeah, for sure, for sure. But it's so great that they're this well versed at a young age, and like the street smarts that they have, I did not have at that age by any means. That part. Yeah, right. Nah, which is that's the best thing That's the best thing we can give our children: some common sense and a great education. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, that's awesome, Raymond. Thank you.